I'm Pam Shockley-Zalabak, the Chancellor of the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to a town hall meeting that provides important information not only for the campus, but for our region. And now it is my pleasure to introduce someone who really needs no introduction in our community, General Gene Renuart, U.S. Air Force retired, former U.S. Northern Commander for NORTHCOM and NORAD, and currently chair of the National Homeland Defense Foundation. General Renuart.
We're going to miss an opportunity, a window of opportunity for our nation that may not repeat itself. And the potential of change that could occur will be significant. As many of you know, here in the community, military and defense-related employees and contractors account for over 73,000 jobs along the Front Range. 73,000. If you change the size of the military presence, again, some 70,000 along the Front Range, the trickle-down effect of that into the economy is significant. I think our chamber in EDC would say there are about 5 jobs tied to every one of the military presence here in the community. So maintaining and appropriately growing the military and defense missions in our region is of crucial importance to our economic stability and that of the nation. Federal military spending in support of our 5 military installations this year will approach $7 billion. And recent research on the impacts of sequestration verify that potentially as many as 17,000 aerospace and defense jobs in the area will be impacted just in Colorado, let alone those kinds of losses across the country. Especially critical for second and third tier contractors who fit underneath the large defense contracting industry. The impacts of sequestration won't only affect our military assets and the communities and states they are located in, but this kind of process can have strategic impacts on the defense of our nation. Operation and maintenance and deployment of new satellite systems technologies, satellite command and control that impacts all of our GPS, even down to things like our ATM machines and the data our farmers use to plow and harvest each year could be affected. Our country's ability to address cybersecurity issues, such as the impact on nearly 5 million small businesses that use a provider like GoDaddy, for example, for their internet businesses. We must rely on our members of Congress to help solve this problem. We all rely, of course, on the state, our county and city governments and officials to put the emphasis on this particular issue so that our members of Congress can make good decisions that benefit the nation in the long term. We're especially pleased to have 3 of those members of Congress here today.
We have been traveling around the country talking about this issue because we're afraid that a lot of Americans don't understand, first of all, the impact on our nation's national security. I think you would agree that the events of the last several days have certainly indicated that the United States of America has many security challenges. And I don't even talk about the Pacific region where rising tensions there. In case you missed it, the Chinese just launched an aircraft carrier. Now, I know that even my Air Force friends understand very well that if you want to project power in the world, it's with an aircraft carrier. So there are great tensions in the region. I can argue that we will argue, and we do all the time, and Doug does too, that we need further cuts and savings and getting some of these costs under control that have gotten out of control, like with the F-35 and others. But at the same time, to take a meat axe and just slash our defense, don't take Doug or Lindsay's or Kelly's or my word for it. Take the word maybe of the Secretary of Defense. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta has said continuously that it will, quote, destroy our national security, that we cannot respond to crises if that happens. Our uniformed chiefs have said that they cannot carry out their missions if this kind of action take place. I won't bother you with the details of how it happened. It was a dumb idea, and a lot of times dumb ideas have bad consequences, and this had bad consequences because we're looking at, on the 1st of January, here we are 2 months out, 3 months out, on the 1st of January 2013, these cuts will automatically start going into place. And by the way, the Pentagon has not planned for these cuts yet. You know that the budgets and and funding take place, requires months, even years. But so it is going to have the most draconian effects. And we want Republican and Democrat and the president to sit down and avoid this train wreck that's about to take place. And we will take any blame you want to for this happening. I might, in full disclosure, both Kelly and Lindsay voted against this. I voted for it. So it was a dumb idea, and it is having now profound consequences.
We all believe that certainly we can reduce spending in a responsible way, and defense spending included. But what you need to know is that we are already reducing defense spending over the next 10 years, $487 billion. And there's a lot of tough choices in those initial reductions, including reducing the size of our Army by 72,000, the size of our Marine Corps by 20,000, keeping our naval fleet at 285 ships, even though many believe, experts that have looked at this, believe that our fleet actually needs to be larger to meet all of our needs around the world, but we're keeping it there. As well as our Air Force, we are reducing the size of our Air Force as well. And that's where we are with the initial reductions that are going to be made. What we are here talking about is an additional across-the-board cut, in addition to the reductions I just talked about, the Meat Act's approach of $500 to $600 billion coming in January. It's indiscriminate. It just cuts everything across the board. And that is what our Secretary of Defense has said we'll shoot ourselves in the head, that our Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has said we will no longer be a global power. Think about it. That we'll be in a position where we will actually have the capacity where diminishing our military could cause increased conflict. And this is from our Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not from any one of us up here. So when we look at the implications, if you just look at the size of our military, and I think about how important Colorado is and this area to defending our country, it's amazing. You've got the U.S. Air Force Academy here, of course, training our future leaders in the military. You have Buckley, Shriver, Peterson Air Force bases. You have Fort Carson, the home of the 4th Infantry Division. We could go on. And you also have a robust defense industrial base where you've got large employers like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, ITT, Honeywell, Raytheon, and of course all of the small businesses that support those industries to make sure that our troops have the equipment and we have the best technology for our men and women uniform. Because as Senator Graham would say, we don't want it to be a fair fight. We don't. We want to have the best technology for our men and women. So here's where we are. If we just looked at the size of our military, what our military leaders have said, for example, for the Army, it would mean another 100,000 reduction in the size of our Army, 50% coming from the Guard and Reserve. If we looked at our naval fleet, the size of our fleet of the ships, I told you it's 285. The Chief of the Navy had said if we implement this, we could go down to 230 to 235. If we look at our Air Force, things like the 5th generation fighter, updating our tankers that are Eisenhower-era tankers, those things we'd have to really challenge ourselves to even be able to do them. When we look at our Marine Corps, you know, I asked the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, what does sequestration do to you? And you know what he told me in the Senate Armed Services Committee? The Marine Corps would be unable to respond to one major contingency on behalf of our country. That keeps me up at night. If that doesn't keep every American up at night, I don't know what will.
They tell me 30% of your GDP is related somehow to the defense footprint here. The capabilities in El Paso County for Department of Defense are just astounding. Some of the leading edge technology, some of the frontline defense capabilities to defend our nation are right here in this county. And if 30% of your GDP comes from that footprint, your county is going to get devastated. You need to put a pen to paper and find out what would happen to the county budget if sequestration became a reality. It starts in January. It's $109 billion a year for a decade, on top of the 487. Communities like this, I don't know how you absorb that. But we're not here to talk about parochial interest per se, but it is important to understand how the people of this part of Colorado would fare from what John described as a really dumb idea. If you had to put a pen to paper and figure out how to accommodate the reductions in this county, I think it would be an eye-opening experience. And you need to do that and share it with your citizens, because the goal of this tour is to make real what Congress is about to do. Congress is at 11% approval rating. Who are these 11% and what do they like? I mean, I haven't met any of them, have y'all? I'm in the place and I don't even like it. So I think this is a good example of a dysfunctional Congress not being able to handle complicated endeavors like men and women in the private sector and the military have to do every day. So from a local perspective, the capabilities that we have in this area would be greatly diminished. And God knows we need space technology, we need NORAD, we need Air Force officers well trained for the future. And what you bring to the fight for America in this county is really unbelievable, that a county in one state would have so much defense infrastructure indispensable to the security of this nation. Now, Kelly gave you some numbers. 1915, smallest Navy since 1950, 232 ships. Smallest Air Force in the history of the Air Force at a time when I think we need this the most. The one thing that I really worry about is losing the defense capabilities from a across-the-board meat-axe approach. The stealth technology, we got any Air Force pilots here? I'll tell you, the stealth technology that was employed in the first Gulf War that you saw in Afghanistan and in the second engagement with Iraq came about from investments in the 1980s. The technology that we're going to rely on in the next fight is being developed today. And ask yourselves this, how do you do an operation like Iran? If you had to go in and neuter the Iranian nuclear program, wouldn't you want all the F-35s and the F-22s you could get your hands on? The F-35 under sequestration ceases to exist as it does today. The F-22 program is on hold with no growth potential. The modernization that has benefited us in the last 10 to 15 years is lost, because if you take personnel out of the mix, the first thing you're going to lose is the ability to modernize your force. Now, I want to talk to you very quickly about the impasse we find ourselves in. The House solved sequestration. You replaced across-the-board defense cuts. We're looking at other areas of the government. We have a proposal to replace defense cuts over the next decade. If you hire 2 of every 3 federal employees that retire back, you can avoid sequestration. The president has a plan to avoid sequestration by raising taxes as part of it, and the other part is cutting spending. The problem is we're miles apart. And having a plan that other people won't buy into is having no plan at all. So what we're trying to do is urge our Republican and Democratic colleagues to do what you do every day in your life, find common ground on tough, difficult situations. So I am willing to put revenue on the table without raising tax rates. Have you heard of Bowles-Simpson? To me, it's a good roadmap to follow. So we're urging our Democrat and Republican colleagues to get together and try to take sequestration off the table, if not before the election, certainly in the lame duck. The President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, should be all over this. When your own Secretary of Defense tells you that you will be destroying the finest military in the history of the world at the time we need it the most, that should be an alarm call for all of us. We should not be here in Colorado Springs. We should be in Washington solving this problem. Look how many weeks and days are left before the election. And my biggest fear is that when this thing starts in January, it's going to be impossible to stop it. So our efforts are not only to inform America about what awaits America, but to challenge the Congress and the President to do something about it before it's too late. So in the lame duck, if we can't do it before the election, we're going to use all the tools available to us to try to find a compromise to avoid what I think would be the biggest foreign policy, national security mistake maybe ever. Because when you inventory the threats this nation faces, there is no peace dividend to be had. Peace is something to work toward and pray for, and peace is best achieved when people are afraid to engage you in war.